Hey guys, tonight we drift into a world that begins with no roads, no compasses, and no written maps, just stars, waves, and a memory that spanned oceans. You're floating on a deck of tightly lashed planks, the air sticky with salt, and the night sky flung wide above you like spilled ink dotted with fire. There's no hum of an engine, just the creaking of wood, the rush of waves, and your heartbeat steady as the tide. You glance down at your lap, not at a scroll or tablet, but a fan of palm leaves, each edge split and etched by fingernail. This is your map. Not that it looks like one. It's more a mnemonic riddle, a whispered language passed from elder to apprentice. These are star maps, built not with precision but with repetition, remembered not read. You reach out and trace the length of one frond, each node a star, each bend a direction. You're learning to see the sky not as decoration but as instruction. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'd love to know where you're watching from and what time it is there. Drop it in the comments. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're sitting with a master navigator on a starlit beach. He doesn't speak in full sentences, only in gestures and the names of stars. His index finger moves in slow arcs, pointing not just to the heavens but through them, to Waka o Tamarareti. That's the canoe constellation, your cosmic ferry boat, strung with stars across the southern hemisphere. You learn that this is how it's always been. No one read these stars. They remembered them, recited them, sang them, chanted their rising and setting as part of bedtime lullabies. You blink and you're suddenly aboard a vessel that seems impossibly delicate, nothing but wood and cordage, but it has carried you thousands of miles. Why does it feel like a dream? Maybe because it defies every rule of modern logic. You probably wouldn't survive a single night on this boat, let alone a voyage that spans 2,000 miles. There's no GPS, no backup motor, no canned food or bottled water, just faith in memory and the ability to read the ocean like it's written in ink you can feel but not see. It's dark, not metaphorically, actually dark. You can't even see your hand in front of your face, but you can hear the swells, feel their rhythm under the hull. The sky above is no static dome, it's a living calendar. You follow the stars as they rise at your shoulder and fall at your hip, like reliable friends making the same journey. The navigator hums under his breath. You hum too, not sure why. Maybe it's because your body is syncing with this floating world, your inner ear adjusting to knowledge older than ink. Mainstream historians agree. Polynesian navigators were among the most sophisticated pre-modern sailors on Earth. Their voyages covered an area larger than North America. Some sailed from Tahiti to Hawaii, others from Samoa to Rapa Nui, Easter Island. And they did it again and again, with accuracy that rivals satellite data. And here's the strange thing. None of it was written down, not until Europeans arrived. These maps existed inside skulls, not scrolls. This kind of knowledge is called non-instrument navigation, and it's still barely understood by outsiders. Even today, training takes decades, and much of it involves just watching and feeling, a kind of slow osmosis through exposure, like learning the scent of your own home. One fringe theory, still debated but oddly poetic, suggests that Polynesian navigators memorized the entire sky in 3D space, using songs that encode the relationships between stars, swells, and seasonal shifts. Think of it like an auditory Google Maps, but you sing it instead of scrolling. Historians still argue whether these chants were consistent across islands or whether each navigator had their own system entirely. Some believe it was more like jazz, structured improvisation with a shared underlying rhythm. And still, there's something mystical about it. One legend says that the maps weren't even meant to be understood, only felt. That's why they were etched in palm leaf bundles, not papyrus scrolls. You didn't read them like text. You held them, ran your fingers along their spines and let your muscles remember. It's a little like falling asleep on your commute and waking up just as you arrive. Your body knows what your mind forgot to track. So here you are, floating toward an island you've never seen, guided by stars you can't name, on a map you can't read, but still, somehow, you feel like you're exactly where you're meant to be. And as the stars wheel overhead and the canoe hums against the water, you realize something even stranger. You're not afraid. Not even a little. You trust the sky, you trust the leaves, and you trust the memory that brought you here, even if it was never yours to begin with. Your fingers graze the edge of a wooden hull and it flexes slightly under your touch. The canoe beneath you creaks, not in complaint, but in conversation. It's alive in a way most boats aren't anymore, and when you look closer, you realize something remarkable. Not a single nail holds it together. Every piece is lashed, fibre to timber, rib to plank, with braided rope made from coconut husk or breadfruit bark. These lashings aren't clumsy or temporary. They're tight, deliberate, elegant in their function. You squint, trying to follow the cordage from knot to knot, and you see how the whole vessel is stitched like a giant piece of fabric. It's strong but flexible, able to breathe with the ocean instead of breaking against it. You're aboard a waka, or vaka, depending on the island's tongue. A traditional Polynesian double-hulled canoe, not quite a catamaran, not quite a kayak. Somewhere in between, a floating paradox of grace and endurance. The hulls are long and narrow, ideal for slicing through waves. Between them is a webbed platform lashed just like everything else, where families once cooked, slept, argued, and probably lost track of their pets. And you wonder, how did they make these with stone tools? Because that's all they had. No steel saws, no power drills, just coral, shells, and volcanic rock ground to cutting edges. Trees were felled with adzes, hollowed with fire, sanded smooth with shark skin. And all this was done before even testing whether the canoe would float. One mistake? That's months of work. And maybe the difference between discovery and drowning. There's a mainstream historical fact that still blows modern minds. These boats were often over 60 feet long, with sails made from plaited pandanus leaves, and some could carry 30-40 people, plus supplies for weeks. They weren't just boats. They were spaceships for water, designed for long-haul exploration. And they worked. They worked so well, in fact, that European explorers often copied Polynesian hull designs centuries later, though rarely gave credit where it was due. You shift slightly and hear the taut moan of the lashings adjusting. At first, it's unsettling. Isn't this a bit flimsy? Shouldn't there be nails, bolts, anything metallic? But then you realise those lashings made of coconut fibre are shock absorbers. When waves slam against the hulls, the boat bends instead of snapping. Modern boats crack. These wiggle. The ocean throws a punch and the canoe answers with a graceful dodge. It's all built with a kind of humility, accepting the sea's power rather than trying to dominate it. One quirky tidbit: some builders believed each canoe had a spirit. You weren't building a machine, you were growing a being. That's why many builders whispered to the wood, apologized to the trees, or left offerings under the bow. If the canoe liked you, it would take you far. If it didn't, well, best not to test that theory. Historians still argue whether the knowledge to build these massive canoes originated from a single core region, maybe Samoa or the Marquesas, or whether different islands innovated simultaneously, guided by shared ancestry and similar needs. It's a murky question, partly because oral history doesn't pin things down like written records do, and partly because, let's be honest, not many people ask boat design to explain human migration, but maybe they should. You run your hands along the hull again, this time with reverence. There's a faint scent of salt and old sap, and something else. Smoke? You follow your nose to a small fire pit built right into the platform. Yes, these canoes even had fire pits, carefully enclosed with stone and sand. You picture someone roasting taro, or heating water for tea as the vessel bobbed through a monsoon. Culinary multitasking, Polynesian edition. It gets more surreal the longer you stare at this vessel, because it wasn't just transport, it was civilization in miniature. People cooked, dreamed, gave birth, and mourned aboard these floating homes. You imagine singing lullabies under a canvas of stars wrapped in bark cloth and sea air. You imagine bailing water by moonlight while your uncle snored beside you. You imagine children asking if they're there yet, long before there even had a name. You look up at the mast, tall, straight, lashed with the same corded elegance, and feel the wind filling a triangular sail that billows like a living thing. These sails didn't just pull, they danced. Angled this way, they caught a whisper of wind. Tilted that way, they harnessed a gale. Steering was done with massive paddles or sometimes by shifting crew weight. GPS? Nah, you had your uncle's gut and your grandmother's memory. Surprisingly reliable, especially after a few generations of practice. There's a moment of silence now, just the creak of rope and the hush of surf. You sit on the lashings and close your eyes, and in that stillness you realize how much effort it took to remember how to make these. In some places that knowledge was lost entirely, buried under colonization, modernization, and time. But in others, it survived in whispers, chants, and the calloused hands of elders. It's a fragile legacy, held together not by nails but by stories. And as the canoe rocks beneath you like a cradle of memory, you begin to see that forgetting how to build something isn't just about losing a skill. It's about losing a way of thinking, a way of moving through the world with patience, with humility, and with rope instead of rivets. Your feet are bare, toes curled around the edges of warm, sun-bleached wood. The ocean stretches out in every direction, vast and blinking with ripples of reflected light. And then, out of nowhere, a fish sails through the air like a startled bird. It arcs, glints, and belly flops with an almost comic splash. Dinner just tried to escape gravity. Welcome to the most thrilling part of your day, catching a flying fish. No nets, no reels, just speed, timing, and an indecent amount of luck. You crouch low, balancing against the sway of the canoe, and watch. Another flash, another leap. The sea's surface is busy with acrobatics. These fish, called malolo in many island languages, aren't really flying. They're gliding, using wing-like fins to escape predators. But to you, perched at the prow with a wide grin and a sharpened stick, it might as well be magic. You've got to be quick. The technique involves spearing mid-air, or sometimes scooping with a woven palm frond basket just before splashdown. It's oddly like a game show challenge. Miss, and your stomach growls all night. Hit, and you've got yourself a silvery prize with eyes still wide in surprise. The thing is, this isn't just fun. It's survival, packaged with a bit of joy. Polynesian sailors relied heavily on whatever the ocean was generous enough to fling aboard. Flying fish, a squid, the occasional confused seabird. The ocean was their pantry, and they knew its moods better than most of us know our own kitchen drawers. Mainstream historians highlight that these long voyages were often accompanied by astonishing food strategies. Canoes carried preserved breadfruit, fermented taro and coconuts, a hydration and calorie bomb wrapped in a bowling ball. Chickens, pigs, and even dogs sometimes made the journey too. Imagine sharing a canoe with your breakfast. Not everyone got along. Still, you couldn't always rely on your floating pantry, so you learned to live with the ocean, not just on it. One quirky but real tidbit? Some navigators used urine to attract fish. No, seriously. A little sprinkle in the water would sometimes lure curious fish close enough to nab. Not glamorous, but hey, when you're 3 weeks from the nearest mango, you improvise. You lean back, the sun warm on your face, the salty breeze brushing across your cheeks. You chew on a bit of dried banana, tough but sweet, and think about how these voyages didn't just require muscle, they demanded mindfulness. Every movement, every gust of wind, every wave pattern mattered. Even fishing was a kind of meditation. Watch, wait, strike. And while you drift, you hear laughter. Someone's just botched a catch, missed the fish, lost the spear, possibly pulled a muscle. Everyone cheers anyway. These moments, silly, salty, and sun-drenched, made the hardship bearable. You weren't just surviving, you were living, ocean style. Historians still argue whether such open ocean fishing was done purely out of need, or whether it became a ritual, an expected part of the journey to keep spirits up. Some believe it was both. After all, catching a fish mid-leap takes skill, sure, but it also brings a kind of primal joy. That aha moment, as universal as a high five. And the more you reflect, the more you realize something. Food wasn't just sustenance, it was orientation. Certain fish only appeared in certain regions. Cloud formations, bird behavior, and even the smell of the air shifted with proximity to islands. Your stomach doubled as a compass, and the taste of a fish. That might tell you how close you were to land, or how far you still had to go. You glance over at a woven basket near the stern. Inside are yams, taro, maybe some fermented coconut paste wrapped in leaves. It doesn't look like much, but it's the result of 1,000 generations of planning. Someone, somewhere, figured out how to pack weeks' worth of food into something that wouldn't rot or sink. And then they passed it on, not through books, but by teaching their kids to do it blindfolded and upside down, probably while telling a story about a shark that stole someone's dinner. You reach down and grab one of the fish that actually landed in the canoe. Its scales glisten like blue glass. In a few hours, it'll be grilled over a tiny flame, eaten with laughter, and remembered only in the way your belly sighs in satisfaction. No Michelin stars, just stars above, and that's more than enough. As night falls, you notice the sea changing colour, shifting from aquamarine to molten gold to an inky hush. You spot phosphorescence trailing in your wake, tiny sea creatures glowing like spilled stardust. And then another fish jumps, and another. The ocean is showing off. You smile. Because here, where your ancestors sailed without maps, caught fish without hooks and sang stories into memory, the line between survival and celebration is a blur. And sometimes, just sometimes, dinner really does fly right into your lap. There's a whisper in the waves tonight, not from the wind or your crewmates, but from the canoe itself. You tilt your ear toward the deck and swear you can hear it hum. It's not your imagination. These vessels talk, in their own way. The lashings creak, the planks shudder just so, the hulls resonate like a wooden throat. This is the song of a seaworthy body, a boat built not just to float, but to feel. You shift your weight slightly, and the canoe responds with a gentle groan. It's a kind of conversation. Every lashing, every knot, every curved rib has been placed to maintain that dialogue between boat and sea. This isn't a machine, it's more like an animal, quietly alive, always listening. And you're just one of the passengers lucky enough to ride along. What's even more astonishing is the design. These weren't randomly shaped rafts. Polynesian canoes were engineered with such precision that even modern naval architects are still baffled by some of their hydrodynamic brilliance. Double-hulled for stability, slightly curved keels to slice through swell, raised ends to deflect waves, and the way they flex, it's like sailing a giant musical instrument, tuned to the frequency of the ocean. Mainstream historians love to point out that many of these design features, especially the double-hull format, predate similar Western naval innovations by centuries. Polynesians were designing long-distance cruisers, while Europeans were still arguing whether sea monsters lived past the horizon. These weren't just primitive rafts. They were deliberate performance-tested vessels. You know, just without the spreadsheets. One of the most mind-bending details? The boats were often asymmetrical. One hull might be slightly longer or shaped differently than the other, not by accident, but by design. The imbalance helped with turning and sailing across wind. It's a concept so counterintuitive that early European observers often dismissed it as an error. But nope, it was genius in disguise. You watch as your navigator peers ahead, then steps lightly to one side of the canoe, adjusting balance with the practiced ease of someone who's done this since before they could walk. He places his ear near the deck, then nods. He's listening to the canoe's voice. It tells him things, how fast you're going, where the swells are hitting hardest, whether the lashings are loosening. You try it too, laying your cheek on the warm wood. The vibrations are faint, but real. A low, steady rhythm, almost like a heartbeat. Yours or the canoe's, you can't quite tell. There's a fringe tradition among some Polynesian groups that certain canoes were given personal names and personalities, and that they could sense fear or pride in their crew. One tale tells of a canoe that refused to sail until its builder apologised for naming it after an ex-girlfriend. Emotional baggage, maritime addition. And yet, despite the science and superstition, historians still argue how exactly these designs spread across such a vast area. Did the knowledge originate in one place and radiate outward? Or did different islands evolve their own variations, adjusting the architecture to match local winds and waves? The archaeological record is mixed. Some hull shapes appear across thousands of miles with almost no variation. Others are highly specialised, like high-peaked prows in Tonga or sleek outriggers in Micronesia. Either way, there's one consistent theme. These boats weren't just tools, they were identity, culture, community. Each one told you where you were from, and more importantly, where you were headed. You glance back at the sail. It's catching just enough wind to nudge you along at a whispering pace. The water hisses under the hulls, and the canoe seems content. You imagine the builders, dozens of them, weaving rope, carving wood, chanting protection songs. It could take months to build a single vessel, and even after completion, it wasn't considered ready until it had passed its sea trials. Often, entire villages would gather for the launch. not to christen it with champagne, but with prayers, chants, and offerings of fruit, fish, and flowers. You wonder what it felt like, being the first to take one out into the deep, no radio, no charts, just intuition, and a boat you built with your own hands. Did they feel proud? Terrified? Probably both. But above all, they trusted the canoe. Trusted that the wood would hold, the knots would grip, and the sea would, at least for today, let them pass. As the moon climbs higher, the canoe's whisper grows steadier. It's singing now, in its own way. The planks flex with each rise and fall of the swell, the rope stretches and tightens like a drawn breath, and you, half dozing on a rolled mat, can almost convince yourself that this boat dreams too. That it remembers past voyages and carries stories in its joints, worn smooth by generations of salt and sun. Because to drift across an ocean in a vessel without nails is to place your faith not in metal or engines, but in knowledge, memory, and the gentle intelligence of lashed-together wood. And when the canoe creaks beneath you in the dark, it isn't groaning. It's just saying hello. The sky's starting to glow at the edges, and the sea is quiet in that slow-breathing way it gets before sunrise. You're still drifting. Wood beneath you, stars above, and somewhere between the two, the voice of a child. Not real, not here, but echoing in your mind. A child learning to navigate before they can even pronounce the word. This is how it begins. Not in school, not with tests or textbooks, but in lullabies and games. You're 6 years old, maybe 7, squinting at the horizon while your grandfather tells you the sea has lines you can't see, roads made of swell and star. You're not sure what he means, but you nod anyway. You've learned that grown-ups rarely explain twice. Instead, he sings a chant. It's long and strange, full of names you don't recognize. You hum it back to him. He smiles. That chant is a star map. You just memorized 2,000 miles of open water, it's not a metaphor. In many Polynesian cultures, children were trained from absurdly young ages to observe. Like, really observe. You're taught the angles of wave sets, the migration of birds, how the wind smells different when land is near. You sleep with stories that hide coordinates in the verses. You grow up feeling the sea as part of your own body. By the time you're a teenager, you can sit blindfolded in a canoe, listen to the slap of waves against the hull, and tell which direction the swells are coming from, and therefore which way you're moving. That's not exaggeration. That's training. Mainstream historians document how young navigators could even see land before it was visible, by reading cloud patterns, seabird flight paths, and how the ocean colour changed in a band near the reef. You try to imagine it. A world where geography lives in your ears and nose and skin, where instead of traffic lights and highway signs, you have the scent of seabirds and the echo of a specific splash. There's a quirky tidbit here that sounds fake but isn't. Some children were taught to pee into the ocean and taste the water afterward. Yeah, taste it, to see how diluted their urine became. The more it spread, the stronger the current. Gross. Maybe. Genius. Absolutely. You think of how different it is from modern schooling. No whiteboards, no recess bells, just your uncle pointing to the stars and saying, "Remember when that one touches the water, we turn left." Simple, elegant, wildly effective. The child's voice in your memory giggles again. Maybe they've just spotted a dolphin, or maybe they've just been allowed to paddle for the first time. Even that's a ceremony. Not because paddling is hard, but because responsibility is heavy. You're not just moving a canoe, you're guiding your people, your family. If you mess up, they drift. Or worse. The ocean doesn't grade on a curve. Historians still argue whether this system, this oral embodied curriculum, was universal across the Polynesian Triangle, or if different islands trained children differently. Some researchers think there were formal schools, places where initiates learned from grandmasters. Others believe it was all informal, absorbed slowly over years like osmosis. The truth's probably somewhere in between, highly structured, but invisible to anyone not raised inside it. And you realize something quiet but profound. This kind of learning doesn't create individuals in the way we think of them. It creates members of a moving whole. You're part of a canoe. You don't need to be the best. You just need to do your part perfectly. Your mind drifts again, this time to a mother braiding pandanus into a sail while telling her son about the island shaped like a sleeping shark. Or a grandfather pointing out where Venus rises, muttering that it's late tonight. These aren't casual observations, they're lessons, encoded knowledge, If you forget them, the sea won't remind you. You hear a soft slap, the paddle of a young boy, probably no older than 10, dipping his blade into the water with practiced rhythm. He's not being playful, he's being precise. Each stroke is the same angle, the same depth. You watch him for a while and you realise this is how he learns. Not by trying to impress, but by mimicking until muscle memory becomes truth. And you wonder, what happens if this knowledge isn't passed down? What if one generation forgets to chant the star names or stops pointing at clouds? Does the sea go silent? Or does it keep speaking, waiting patiently for someone to listen again? The light grows stronger. The stars begin to fade. You stretch, your back stiff from sleeping on woven matting, but you don't feel tired. You feel connected, like you just took part in something ancient and invisible. Not as an outsider, but as a listener, because maybe that's the core of it all. These kids didn't learn navigation by being taught. They learned it by watching someone who remembered. And now, so have you. The sun is higher now, its light spreading across the water like warm syrup. But you're not using the sky to navigate. Not today. Today, your teachers are the swells. You sit cross-legged in the canoe, looking at the empty sea and thinking, there's nothing here. And that's where you're wrong. There's everything here if you know how to read it. You lean over the side and drop a thin stick into the water. It floats. That's not the test. You wait. The stick begins to drift, turning ever so slightly. Your eyes narrow. To you it's a stick. To your navigator it's a compass. Not because it points north, but because it reveals the direction of the swells, those long, slow ocean pulses that move beneath the choppier waves. Swells are subtle, deep, patient, like the ocean's slow heartbeat. You close your eyes, feel it. There's a rhythm underneath the surface splash. One wave pushes you from the southeast, another, barely noticeable, presses from the west. You're sitting inside a crosshatch of invisible highways, and if you know which swell is from your homeland and which leads to your destination, you don't need a single star. This method is called ETAC in Micronesia, though different island groups had different terms. The principle is the same. By memorizing the swell fingerprint of a given route, you could know your position by feel alone. It's absurdly elegant, and absurdly easy to mess up if you're hungover or, say, easily distracted by flying fish. Mainstream historians confirm this. Traditional navigators could detect and interpret multiple swell patterns simultaneously, like listening to 5 conversations at once and still catching every word. This isn't mysticism. It's practiced sensory attention. Modern scientists have even tried to replicate it, but few can match the skill of the old masters. You just can't cram for this kind of test. There's a fringe story, possibly true, possibly poetic, that some elite navigators could lay on their backs in the canoe, close their eyes, and let the sensation of the swells passing under their bodies alone tell them if they drifted off course. Their spine became the compass, their breath synced with the ocean, their dreams, probably sponsored by Dramamine. You try it now, reclining against the gently woven mat. You close your eyes and breathe. At first, you feel nothing but the canoe's usual motion, but then, wait, a faint double beat. 2 patterns, one pushing diagonally, one straight beneath you. It's not obvious, it's not even noticeable unless you're really tuned in, but it's there. And now that you've felt it, you'll never unfeel it. Historians still argue whether this swell navigation method was standardized. Like, did every navigator agree on what a southeast swell felt like? Or was it entirely individual, passed down within families and villages? Some think there were mental maps of swell zones, almost like underwater roads that aligned with seasonal winds. Others believe it was pure intuition honed over decades. Both sides probably agree it's frustratingly undocumented, since, well, no one wrote this stuff down. You sit up and reach for another stick, this one's shorter, you drop it near the bow. Same direction? No, it spins slightly. The swell's angle has shifted. You smile. The ocean is talking again, and this time, you're catching more than just vowels. And that's the beauty of this. Swell navigation doesn't work like a compass. It's not fixed. It's fluid. You're not trying to resist the ocean. You're dancing with it, step by watery step. Each swell tells you where you are, but only if you stop trying to control everything and just listen. A splash breaks your focus. Someone at the rear of the canoe has jumped in, probably to cool off. The canoe rocks, but not dangerously. The double hull holds steady. You watch the swimmer float beside the vessel, relaxed, unhurried. You wonder if they're feeling the swells too. Probably. Once you know they're there, it's hard to ignore. And it makes you think, how much of the modern world is just us forgetting to listen? We've traded bone memory for Bluetooth, replaced wave reading with Wi-Fi. It's not worse, necessarily, but it is quieter in the wrong places. You lie back again. Let the sun warm your eyelids, let the swells roll beneath you. For a few minutes you become the boat. Your ribs echo the lashings. Your chest rises like a sail. And in this soft rocking rhythm, you begin to understand something deeper. These navigators didn't sail to places. They sailed with them. Islands weren't destinations. They were songs. Each root a melody, each swell a verse. If you learned the tune, you could sing yourself across half the planet. So you keep singing, silently, letting the ocean hum its chorus through your bones. You open your eyes to a sky so vast and blue it almost feels fake, like someone overdid the saturation. The ocean reflects it perfectly, a rippling mirror of endless blue on blue. But there's no line, no border, just open water in every direction. And yet, you don't feel lost, because you've stopped thinking of this as empty. There are no fences on the ocean, no dotted lines, no blinking signs that say, "You're now entering Fiji." But for the ancient Polynesians, this wasn't a void. It was a neighbourhood, one with invisible streets, mental landmarks, and remembered destinations you couldn't point to on a globe but could feel in your chest. You lean forward on the canoe platform, watching the horizon. Somewhere out there, beyond where your eyes can reach, is another island. You can't see it. No one can. But the clouds know, the birds know, even the fish know, if you're patient enough to listen. The idea that the ocean had no borders sounds romantic until you realise how practical it was. Polynesian voyagers didn't think in miles from shore. They thought in days of sail, in bird flights, in star risings. They navigated the Pacific, an ocean that makes up 1/3 of the Earth's surface, by turning it into a mental map of remembered relationships. Mainstream historical consensus now supports the idea that Polynesians deliberately colonised this vast area, travelling thousands of miles between islands from Hawaii in the north to New Zealand in the south to Easter Island in the east. And they did it repeatedly, not just once, then forgotten, but in two-way voyages, round trips across distances that many European explorers later failed to manage with far more advanced ships. And here's the kicker, they didn't consider it remarkable. It was just what you did. You needed breadfruit, you went to the island that had better trees, you needed basalt for adzes, you knew which island had the right quarry. Trade routes crisscrossed the ocean without ever needing a dotted line or a customs officer. One quirky tidbit. In some regions, people even sent gifts across hundreds of miles by canoe without accompanying crew. Imagine that. A floating Amazon package delivered by the sea. A canoe loaded with taro or rare shells would be lashed tight, given a ceremonial push, and, if the winds and waves behaved, would arrive at its intended island weeks later, where people would recognise its design and say, "Ah, this is from Uncle Matua's clan." Historians still argue whether the speed of Polynesian expansion was fast and furious, something like a maritime blitz, or slow and generational with long pauses between island hops. Linguistic evidence suggests a rapid push, especially between Samoa, Tonga and the Marquesas. But archaeological layers point to longer gaps in some places. The truth is buried beneath centuries of ash, coral, and very polite disagreement. You peer over the side of the canoe, watching the water slip past in slow ribbons. You realise now that these people didn't just survive the ocean, they domesticated it, turned it into a home without walls. Their concept of space was fluid, not like our map-pinned world. For them, movement was identity. To stay in one place forever would have been as unthinkable as trying to sail without stars. You sit with that thought for a while, that the sea, in all its danger and uncertainty, was also the most familiar thing in the world, like your backyard, or your favourite chair, just bigger, a lot bigger. The navigator at the stern murmurs something and nods toward a flock of birds. You follow his gaze, white dots against the sky, frigate birds. You know what that means now. Land is within 100 miles. Maybe less. These birds don't sleep on the water. They need trees, and trees mean shore. But no one rushes. There's no gasp of relief, because this isn't a rescue, it's routine. You're not escaping the ocean, you're just visiting somewhere new. And as the canoe slices forward, guided by swell, bird and memory, you realise borders are a fiction we invented when we stopped listening to the sea. Out here, every path is open, every island is a neighbour, and every wave carries the scent of somewhere you haven't yet learned to call home. Night again. The stars are back, scattered across the sky like someone upended a basket of glowing seeds. You lie flat on the canoe's deck, your head propped against a bundle of woven mats, your eyes tracing slow arcs above. You're not just stargazing, you're navigating. There's no compass here, no glowing screen or robotic voice saying, "Turn left in 500 meters." Instead, you read the heavens the way others read street signs, and you don't even need all of them, just a few reliable friends. You focus on one bright point near the horizon, that's Sirius, or Ta'urua, as it's called here. When it rises in that spot, you know which direction you're facing. Another star appears, Altair, then Canopus. Together they form the skeletal grid of your star compass. You don't just watch them. You remember where they rise, how high they arc, and how long they take to disappear behind you. These motions are burned into your brain like muscle memory. The traditional Polynesian star compass divides the horizon into dozens of equal houses. Each house corresponds to a cardinal direction and is filled with stars that rise and set in predictable paths. Your mental compass might have as many as 32 directions, each with its own stellar guardians. You don't draw them, you chant them, over and over, until your voice becomes a directional system. Mainstream historians now widely recognise that Polynesian navigators were skilled astronomical observers. They memorised star paths the way we memorise street names. But more than that, they knew how to switch between stars as the night wore on. When one sank below the horizon, another would rise to replace it. It's like changing lanes in the sky, without missing a beat. The moon plays a role too, not just for light, but for tides, for fish activity, for marking time. You're told to note whether it's waxing or waning, whether it smiles like a bowl or looks stern as a gourd. Each phase offers clues. Clouds become guides as well, streaks that trail in certain patterns, often indicating prevailing winds or hidden islands. Even the colour of the sky during sunset can be a subtle signal. Reddish haze might mean dry land within a few days' sail, and then there's the sun. By day, you can navigate using its arc across the sky. You memorise its zenith at different times of year, its angle at morning and afternoon. You compare shadow lengths. You feel the warmth on your left cheek instead of your right, and know the course has shifted. Navigation is not just sight, it's touch, smell, hearing, temperature. The sea is your sensory classroom. There's a quirky historical footnote here. Some navigators trained their peripheral vision to track multiple stars at once. They'd sit facing forward but watch stars on either side of the canoe without turning their heads. Try it sometime. It's harder than it sounds, especially when you're trying not to fall overboard. Historians still argue over how uniform this training was across the Pacific. Did all island groups use the same star compass? Were constellations named and organised the same way from Tonga to Rapa Nui? Or was it more like dialects, shared concepts, but local variations? Some evidence suggests overlapping core systems, while other accounts hint at entirely distinct mnemonic songs depending on region and lineage. No one's fully sure, because again, nobody wrote this stuff down. You close your eyes and chant the stars under your breath. You're not singing, you're steering. Your voice guides you just as much as the tiller. Ta'urua rises in the east. Te Waka o Tamareriti sails high. The shark swims south. You mumble like a sleepwalker through the cosmos, drifting along invisible lines etched into the sky. A breeze brushes your face. The sail shifts with a gentle sigh. You're still on course. You glance at your navigator again. He hasn't moved in hours, it seems. Just sits there, staring at nothing, blinking slow and patient. You wonder how he knows you haven't drifted. There's no course to check, no landmarks, just stars. Stars that look exactly the same as they did 2 hours ago. And yet he knows. You watch him shift his gaze upward, murmur a few names, then look down at the waves. He gives a small nod. All is well. You feel your breath match the rise and fall of the canoe. You're not separate from this process. You are the compass now, the chant, the swell reader, the stargazer. And maybe, just maybe, you're starting to remember something your ancestors never forgot. The wind dies, the stars hold their breath, and for the first time in days, the canoe stops gliding. You're adrift. No forward pull, no rhythmic slap of water along the hull, just the subtle bob of a boat with nowhere to be. You sit up, look around and see. Nothing. Sky. Sea. More sea. And a faint sense that the horizon is laughing at you. This is the moment. The one nobody trains for, but everyone fears. The moment the wind vanishes and your carefully memorized route, your swell maps, your star compass, your chants are useless. You're a speck in a glassy void. Your canoe is no longer a dance partner to the sea. It's just furniture now. This is how some voyages ended. Not with drama, not with shipwreck, but with silence. You wonder, just for a moment, how many never made it. How many brave souls climbed into canoes, clutched at stars and drifted into eternity. Historians still debate the ratio of planned to accidental migrations. Were all these journeys deliberate expeditions of discovery, or were some just the result of getting caught in a storm and hoping for the best? Some scholars argue that most islands in Polynesia were settled intentionally, that navigators had a method, a science of exploration. But there's an opposing camp, one that suggests many discoveries were lucky escapes, rafts of survivors blown off course during typhoons, people who never meant to explore but couldn't go back. You sit there on the deck looking out at the unbroken sea and think, both could be true, because sometimes you explore on purpose, and sometimes you just refuse to die. There's a darker, quieter truth here. For every triumphant landfall, there were surely others who vanished without a trace. No wreckage, no story, no chance. Just the slow erasure of names swallowed by waves. The Pacific is beautiful, yes, but it is not kind. And yet, somehow, those voyages mattered. Even the failures. They taught others where not to go, or when to leave, or how to read the warning signs. That knowledge became woven into stories, myths about angry gods, or wandering ghosts, or floating islands that lured you off course. These weren't just superstitions, they were survival advice, coded for bedtime. You lie back, the silence pressing down like a warm blanket. No wind, no birds. Just the sound of your own breath and the quiet hiss of tiny ripples. You realise now that the drifting might be the hardest part. Not because you're in danger, but because you don't know if you are. You could be hours from land, or days, or forever. It's in moments like this that faith kicks in. Not the kind that involves temples or robes, but the raw, desperate belief that somewhere ahead the world is waiting for you. You tighten a loose rope, not because it needs it, but because doing something helps. Your hands need to move, even if the canoe doesn't. A quirky oral tale floats to mind, one about a navigator who drifted for so long that he began talking to the stars like they were old friends. "Where are you, cousin?" he'd ask Orion. "Don't be shy now." He eventually claimed that the stars talked back. No one believed him, but they also never got lost. You sit up and scan the sky. The stars are still there, steady, reliable, and if the clouds stay away, they'll help you as soon as the wind returns. Until then, you wait. Historians often romanticize these voyages, but this drifting, is rarely talked about. It's not heroic, it's not cinematic, it's just waiting and hoping, and rationing dried bananas until your teeth hurt. You glance at your crewmates. They're quiet too. No panic, no shouting, just soft murmurs and the occasional stretch. Because they've all been here before. Drifting isn't failure, it's part of the journey. And in the stillness, you start to notice things you'd missed before. The way the stars shimmer a little harder when the air is damp. The way the canoe rocks differently when there's current beneath you. The subtle differences in temperature from one side of the sky to the other. Maybe you're not so lost after all. Because even when you drift, you learn. And sometimes, learning to wait is the most important navigation skill of all. You step onto the shore of an island so new it almost feels unreal. The sand crunches softly beneath your feet, fine grains shaped by the ocean's patient hands over centuries. This place wasn't always here. It grew out of fire and water, a volcanic birthright rising from the depths waiting for explorers like you. The island feels empty. No villages, no roads, no gardens. Just wind-sculpted dunes, scrubby palms, and the endless sigh of waves. It's a blank slate, waiting to be written on by generations to come. Colonies made of sand and dreams. You walk inland, noticing how the volcanic soil is both harsh and promising. It's black and gritty, warm underfoot and full of minerals. This island might be barren now, but it's fertile, ready for taro, breadfruit and yams to take root. You imagine the first settlers arriving with nothing but their canoes, their memories, and the hope to turn this raw earth into home. Mainstream historians confirm that many Polynesian islands started this way. New land formed by volcanoes erupting under the sea. These islands were often tiny, isolated and hostile at first, yet the Polynesians settled them, despite the challenges, shaping landscapes and ecosystems with farming and careful management. A quirky tidbit: on some islands, ancient settlers carried soil in baskets from other places, basically bringing their own gardening starter kits. They transplanted seeds, plants and even animals to create a sustainable environment. It was like ecological engineering long before the term existed. Historians still debate how quickly these new colonies grew. Some argue rapid population growth spread people quickly across the Pacific. Others suggest slow, deliberate settlement, with long periods of adjustment and experimentation before expansion. Either way, the determination to settle these islands is clear. You feel the soft wind on your face and hear the distant cry of seabirds nesting nearby. Life will find a way here. The settlers' first tasks were not easy. Digging planting pits, building shelters from palm leaves and wood, securing fresh water. It's hard work, but they had no choice. The ocean was behind them, and survival was ahead. You pause near a cluster of volcanic rocks and notice tiny shoots of green pushing through cracks in the lava. Resilience incarnate. It's a reminder that even in the most unlikely places, life begins again. The settlers believed these islands were gifts from the gods, places to prove their strength and honour ancestors. That belief carried them through droughts, storms and loneliness. There's a legendary story of an island where the first trees were planted with prayers and songs, each seed blessed with a chant to ensure growth. These rituals weren't just superstition. They were ways to bond people to the land, to remind them of their place in a vast, interconnected world. As you stand on this volcanic shore, you realise how astonishing it is that these tiny specks of land scattered across the ocean became cradles of culture, language and tradition. Islands made of sand and fire transformed into vibrant homes. You run your hand through the black soil, feeling the weight of history beneath your fingers. The island is young, but it's waiting for the next generation of navigators, farmers and storytellers to make it theirs. And as the sun begins to set, painting the sky in molten gold and deep purple, you know that this place will never truly be empty again. You cup your hands and bring them to your lips, tasting the salty air. But thirst still gnaws at your throat, reminding you that water, fresh, sweet, life-giving, is as precious as the stars that guide you. On these remote islands, survival often depends on knowing how to find water where it's almost invisible. You're about to learn a secret. Water can be coaxed from the air, not just the ground. Polynesian settlers mastered this subtle art. They discovered how to wring moisture from leaves heavy with dew, collecting it drop by drop into woven containers. It's not the most glamorous way to hydrate, but in the middle of the Pacific it's often the only way. On some islands, they built ingenious stone catchments to funnel rainwater into storage pits lined with leaves, keeping it clean and cool. These reservoirs were lifelines during dry spells. You can almost hear the patient drip-drip of water collecting in earthen cisterns, a quiet symphony of survival. Mainstream scholars confirm that harvesting rainwater was an essential skill, especially on coral atolls with no rivers or lakes. In fact, some islands relied entirely on rainwater catchment and the moisture stored inside coconuts. You might think this sounds like living on a desert island, but it was anything but a passive existence. Here's a quirky fact. Some Polynesian groups used large leaves to create umbrellas that funneled rainwater straight into bamboo tubes, portable water bottles made from plants. They basically carried natural hydration systems everywhere. Genius level. Survival. Fire was another critical tool for making life livable. You don't have matches, but you do have shells, curved, sharp-edged, and abundant on the beach. Using a shell as a scraper against a piece of driftwood, you slowly coax sparks from dry leaves. This process, slow and smoky, was a rite of passage for many young islanders. Historians still debate whether early Polynesians brought fire-starting tools with them on their voyages, or if they relearned the technique on new islands. Some evidence suggests fire was preserved inside hollow bamboo tubes, passed from generation to generation like a sacred flame. Others propose they rekindled it with friction methods wherever they landed. You imagine sitting around a fire pit, the smell of burning coconut husk mingling with salt and smoke as the first food cooks over the embers. Fire wasn't just heat, it was community, safety, and a symbol of human tenacity. Water and fire, two elements as ancient as the ocean, yet vital in the hands of these voyagers. You drink in this knowledge, realizing that survival wasn't just about sailing, it was about making the impossible routine. The ocean may be vast, but with leaves and shells you learn to claim small patches of life. Every drop of water, every flicker of flame, is a quiet rebellion against the wilderness. You feel your pulse steady, your breath calms. In this moment, with sea and sky all around, you grasp how mastery of these simple tools turned wanderers into settlers, travellers into islanders. And as the sun sets behind a distant ridge, you're reminded that even the smallest things, like a dewy leaf or a shell, can mean the difference between drifting and thriving. You lean against the canoe's edge, listening, not to the ocean this time, but to the stories carried on the wind. These are whispers of islands far away, tales that travelled not by messenger or letter, but by tide and talk. Polynesians had a remarkable way of sharing news. Even without Wi-Fi, phones or carrier pigeons, trade routes crisscrossed the Pacific like veins of life. Canoes laden with taro, feathers, or carved wooden bowls set off from island to island, carrying not just goods, but gossip, rumours, and the latest dance craze. It was like the ancient version of a group chat, except it took weeks instead of milliseconds. Imagine hearing about a wedding on one island, then passing that story on to another, slightly altered with each retelling. Someone got into a fight over a coconut harvest, or a chief just remarried a princess from across the ocean. Word travelled on the tides, carried by people who understood the ocean's moods and the importance of connection. Mainstream historians note that such exchanges weren't just cultural, they were vital for survival. Trading crops helped islands with scarce resources thrive. Shells from one place might become currency in another, and sometimes political alliances were sealed with the exchange of rare gifts, creating networks that spanned thousands of miles. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some islands developed a kind of talking drum system. Percussive signals sent across distances to communicate warnings or celebrations. While not as far-reaching as the sea routes, they're an example of the ingenuity Polynesians employed to stay connected. Historians still debate how formal these communication networks were. Was there an organised postal service, or was it more spontaneous and personal? Some argue it was a highly coordinated system, with canoe captains acting as messengers and diplomats. Others believe it was informal, relying on chance encounters and word of mouth. Either way, you realise this wasn't isolation. It was a vast, watery web where news travelled as surely as the tides. And every island knew its neighbours' stories better than many modern cities know their own. You feel the weight of that connection now. Being out here, surrounded by ocean, can feel lonely. But it's not. The waves carry voices, the stars watch over the stories, and you're part of a community that spans half the globe. You lean back and imagine the sound of laughter and song drifting across the water, uniting people who might never meet face to face but are bound by shared tales. The ocean isn't just a barrier, it's a messenger, and in that quiet, drifting moment, you understand how the past is never really gone. It's just riding the currents, waiting for you to listen. You step cautiously onto an island where the usual signs of settlement are absent. No men bustle around, no voices carry across the breeze, only women, strong, purposeful, moving with quiet authority. The stories say this is an island where the men vanished. Not by choice, not by fate, but as if swallowed by the sea itself. The legend feels eerie, like something from a ghost story whispered around a fire. But the women remained, organised, unbroken, ruling their small world with fierce determination. Some tales suggest they formed a society entirely run by women, where traditions shifted and power took new shapes. Mainstream historians acknowledge that Polynesian societies often had complex gender roles, with women holding significant spiritual and social influence. But the idea of an island ruled solely by women is more elusive, a mix of myth, oral history, and possibly misunderstood events. The truth blurs between reality and metaphor, a quirky fact. Some islands practiced temporary metrarchies during times of crisis, when men were away voyaging or lost to war. Women would step into leadership roles, overseeing agriculture, ritual, and defense. These periods were remembered in song and story, sometimes exaggerated into tales of islands without men. Historians still debate whether these legends reflect historical realities, or are symbolic tales teaching lessons about resilience, gender balance, or social change. It's unclear if any island truly lacked men for generations, or if these stories were metaphors for broader social dynamics. You walk among coconut palms, feeling the soft crunch of sand and leaves underfoot. The women here weave mats, tend gardens, and maintain the sacred fires. Their strength feels palpable, as if the island itself breathes through them. You imagine the challenges they faced. Without men to fish the outer reefs or carry heavy loads, daily life must have shifted dramatically. Yet life persisted, adapted, and thrived. The ocean hums around you, indifferent yet constant. It witnessed these changes silently, carrying the women's stories to distant shores. You realize these stories aren't just curiosities. They're reminders of human adaptability, the way communities shift and survive in the face of loss, isolation, or upheaval. And as the sun dips low, casting long shadows across the sand, you feel a quiet respect for those who held the line when the tides of history left them alone. You sit cross-legged on the deck, peeling a ripe banana slowly, savouring its sweetness as the canoe sways gently beneath you. This is no ordinary banana. It's a symbol of something bigger. Banana diplomacy. Yes, diplomacy involving fruit. Because in the vast Polynesian Ocean, trade wasn't just about goods. It was about relationships, alliances, and communication. Across thousands of miles of open water, islanders exchanged gifts, sometimes feathers, sometimes finely carved tools, sometimes crops like bananas. These exchanges weren't random acts of kindness. They were calculated moves in a complex network of alliances, kinship ties, and social status. When you trade a banana, you're saying, "I acknowledge you, I respect your place." When you receive a song in return, you're joining a conversation that spans generations. Trade routes were highways of culture, woven through with food, music, and meaning. Mainstream historians have documented extensive trade networks connecting islands from Fiji to Hawaii. Goods like red feathers, which were highly prized for ceremonial use, travelled great distances. Sweet potatoes, not native to Polynesia, were carried westward, indicating contact with South America long before Europeans arrived. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some islands used banana trees as a form of political currency. Planting a banana grove for a visiting chief was like sending a diplomatic envoy, fruitful and permanent. The banana became a living ambassador. Historians still debate whether these trade routes operated under formal rules, or if they were more ad hoc, guided by chance meetings and mutual benefit. Some scholars argue there was a kind of proto-globalization happening, with carefully maintained trade ties ensuring peace and prosperity. You watch as a basket of bananas is carefully passed from one canoe to another during a ceremonial meeting. The exchange is accompanied by song and dance, a ritual blending negotiation with celebration. It strikes you how food, simple, everyday food, can carry such power. A banana isn't just a snack here, it's a statement, a treaty, a shared history wrapped in yellow skin. You take a bite, feeling the soft texture, and realize that the ties binding these islands were as sweet and complex as the fruit in your hand. And as the waves hum their eternal song, you understand that diplomacy in the Pacific was less about words and more about gifts, gestures, and the unspoken language of generosity. You step barefoot onto the rugged lava fields that stretch before you like a black desert. The ground crunches underfoot, sharp, jagged, and still warm from ancient fires. This is a land forged by volcanoes where the earth itself breathes fire and reshapes the horizon. Here, gods were born from molten rock, and myths walked alongside humans. The island's landscape tells a story older than memory. Piles of black rock piled high, cooled and cracked in impossible patterns. You can almost hear the rumble beneath your feet, the heartbeat of the planet itself. These volcanic plains are both beautiful and hostile, a reminder that life in the Pacific is often a negotiation between creation and destruction. Mainstream scholars note that Polynesian cultures deeply revered volcanoes, seeing them as homes of gods and ancestors. For example, the goddess Pele in Hawaii embodies the fiery spirit of volcanic activity, and her legends are woven into the very geography of the islands. A quirky tidbit: some volcanic rocks were used as sacred altars or tools. Basalt, a hard volcanic stone, was prized for making adzes, sharp-edged tools essential for canoe building and house construction. Carrying a piece of the volcano into your home was like inviting the gods' power with you. Historians still debate how volcanic eruptions influence migration patterns. Did eruptions force people to flee, or did they see new land created by lava as an opportunity, a blank canvas to settle? Archaeological evidence suggests both. Some islands show signs of sudden abandonment following eruptions, while others were colonized rapidly as fresh land appeared. You hike carefully across the black sands, imagining the first settlers stepping cautiously onto these new shores, uncertain but hopeful. They had to learn how to farm in soil made of broken rock, how to find fresh water, and how to live with the constant reminder of fire beneath. There's an ancient chant that honors the volcanoes, calling them the fires that give and take, a dual force shaping life's fragile balance. It's a prayer, a warning, and a celebration all in one. As the sun sets, casting long shadows across the lava fields, you feel the raw power of this place, the way nature's fury can create both destruction and beauty. You realize that living here was an act of courage, faith, and resilience. The volcanoes weren't just hazards, they were sacred partners in the dance of existence, and as night falls, the stars blaze above these black fields, reminding you that even in the shadow of fire, the sky remains eternal. You watch as the last great voyaging canoes are pulled ashore, their sails furled and hulls resting on the sand like ancient beasts laid to rest. These vessels, once the lifeblood of exploration and connection across the vast Pacific, are quietly fading into memory. Why did they vanish? The ocean no longer sings their song as loudly. The once frequent departures and arrivals slowed, then stopped. Engines replaced paddles, and steel replaced wood. The canoe, that masterwork of craft and tradition, became a relic. Mainstream historians point to multiple reasons. Colonization disrupted cultural practices, new technologies rendered traditional navigation obsolete. Social changes shifted priorities. Many Polynesian communities lost the knowledge of how to build and sail these massive vessels, a loss felt as deeply as the disappearance of language or song. But there's a more subtle reason. The ocean itself changed. Increased commercial shipping, pollution and climate shifts altered the waves and winds that once guided voyagers. The mental maps became harder to trust, a quirky but sad detail. Some old navigators feared the ocean, the very element their ancestors mastered. The sea, once a path and friend, turned into something to be avoided. Canoes gathered dust, sails rotted, and elders whispered warnings about the dangers of open water. Historians still argue about how abrupt this decline was. Did it happen quickly after European contact, or was it a slow erosion over decades with pockets of resilience? Some islands maintained voyaging traditions far longer than others, and even today, small groups are reviving the craft, determined to reconnect with their ancestors' ways. You watch the canoes resting silently, imagining the stories they carried, the dreams they sailed toward. It's a quiet end to a proud chapter, one filled with courage, skill, and boundless curiosity. And yet, even as the canoes fade, their spirit lingers in the rhythm of the waves, the call of the stars and the hearts of those who remember. You find yourself sitting beside a quiet lagoon, surrounded by lush palms and the soft rustle of leaves. The people here no longer speak the language of the ocean with the same fluency. The tales of voyaging have faded, and with them, a deep connection to the sea. The descendants of great sailors now hesitate at the shoreline, fearful of the waves that once were their highways. It's a puzzling reversal. How could the heirs of masters of navigation forget what kept their ancestors alive? Historians point to a combination of colonial influence, the spread of new religions, and economic changes that pushed communities to settle and stay put. The canoe, once a symbol of freedom and exploration, became a relic of a past that some preferred not to remember. Yet, there's a quieter story beneath the surface. Some elders say the ocean began to seem unpredictable, even dangerous. Storms grew fiercer, tides less reliable, and the old rhythms were harder to read. With each lost voyage, the fear grew. It wasn't just the physical danger, it was the loss of trust. A fringe theory suggests that this loss of ocean confidence wasn't just cultural but psychological, a collective trauma passed through generations. Fear, after all, can be as contagious as courage. Despite this, small groups held on. Secretly, they kept the knowledge alive. Quiet voyages, hidden lessons, whispered chants beneath the moon. These guardians of tradition became the seeds for revival. Today, you meet these keepers of memory, navigators who refuse to let the stars fall silent. They sail without engines or maps, trusting the sky and sea just like their ancestors. Their voyages are acts of resistance and love. Sitting by the water, you realize that forgetting the ocean isn't the end. It's a pause, and with patience, the song will be sung again. You watch as a new generation steps onto the deck of a sleek hand-carved canoe. No motors, no GPS, just memory, skill, and the breath of ancient stars. These modern navigators are reviving old ways, methods lost for decades, now blossoming again like a long-dormant flower. You hear the rhythm of chants rising into the sky, voices weaving tales of ancestors who sailed the endless blue. It's more than a ritual, it's a reclamation. These voyages are retracing routes their grandparents only whispered about, paths erased by time but etched deep in cultural DNA. Mainstream historians celebrate this renaissance, noting that organizations across the Pacific, like the Polynesian Voyaging Society, have spearheaded efforts to revive traditional navigation. Using double-hulled canoes like the Hokulea, navigators sail thousands of miles without modern instruments, relying solely on stars, swells, and intuition. There's a quirky, inspiring detail. Some of these new navigators trained under Hawaiian masters who had kept the art alive through oral tradition, passing knowledge in secret during a time when such skills were undervalued or even discouraged. Historians still debate how widespread these revival efforts will become, and whether the knowledge can fully recover after centuries of disruption. But the passion and precision of these new navigators suggest a hopeful future. You watch as the canoe glides through sparkling waves, a living bridge between past and present. The stars above look brighter, as if cheering the journey, and in that moment, you feel the pulse of history, the ocean's memory beating strong in human hearts once more. You drift into the realm of scholarly debate, where the lines between myth and history blur like twilight on the water. Did Polynesian navigators reach the Americas long before Columbus? The evidence is tantalizing, but the answer remains uncertain, caught in the currents of controversy. Sweet potatoes, native to South America, appear in Polynesia centuries before European contact. How did they get there? Some argue that Polynesians crossed vast stretches of ocean to bring them back, evidence of ancient trans-Pacific contact. Others suggest seeds travelled by ocean currents or birds, requiring no human intervention. Archaeologists have found chicken bones in South America that closely resemble Polynesian varieties, another puzzle piece hinting at ancient voyages. But skeptics caution that contamination, dating errors, or parallel evolution could explain these findings. Mainstream historians remain cautious but intrigued. The idea that Polynesian canoes might have drifted or sailed to the Americas challenges traditional narratives of exploration and migration. It suggests a world more interconnected than previously thought. A quirky detail: some Polynesian legends speak of distant lands across the sea, with strange people and unfamiliar stars, stories dismissed for decades as fantasy, but now revisited with fresh eyes. Debate continues. Some scholars see these findings as proof of Polynesian ingenuity and daring. Others demand more concrete evidence. It's a mystery that pushes the boundaries of history, geography, and imagination. As you gaze at the horizon, you wonder about those lost voyages, whether by design or accident, that changed the world in ways we are only beginning to understand. And you drift with the knowledge that history is never settled. It's a wave, always moving, always reshaping. You lie back on the deck, the ocean's gentle rocking lulling you closer to sleep. The waves murmur secrets, names, places, stories only the sea still remembers. It's as if the entire Pacific whispers to you, a lullaby carried on the breeze, inviting you to rest. The stars above blink softly, no longer just guides, but companions in this quiet voyage. Their light drifts through the night, stretching across centuries of voyaging, memory and discovery. You feel yourself drifting too, not lost, but carried by currents older than time. The ocean remembers your ancestors' songs, their fears, their triumphs. It remembers the canoes that danced on its surface, the children who learned its language, and the explorers who sailed without maps or guarantees. You breathe slowly, your body swaying with the rhythm of the tides. The past and present merge into one seamless wave, carrying you gently toward rest. And as your eyes close, the ocean's voice softens to a whisper, promising to keep these stories safe until the stars call you again. Sleep now. The journey is yours. 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 The journey is yours.